In this video, you're going to learn how you can use both OpenAI and Bubble to create your very own custom GPT model. This is great if you have an existing knowledge base that you just want to train GPT with. In our example today, we're going to create a GPT chatbot that can answer questions specifically related to onboarding someone to a new job.
Really?
Throughout this guide, we'll explain how to connect all of the APIs, build the interface of the app, and of course, everything else in between. Now look, I'm gonna hand this one over to Luca, and he's gonna walk you through all of this step-by-step instructions.
Hello everyone, today we're gonna be learning how we can fine-tune our own ChatGPT model. And for this demonstration, I'm gonna be building out a little help page for whatever Bubble application you might be building. So this is obviously for a job finder help website, but this is where your potential users would come and get answers before they start emailing you about how to use your product or service. So as you can see, we have this toggle here for the model that this is going to be using. So this is the standard GPT 4.0 mini, and this is actually our personally trained model based on our question and answers. So if we ask the standard GPT, can I add new team members, ? And we ask the standard GPT model, you can see we kind of get this long randomized basic answer. It totally depends on the platform you're using. So obviously you wouldn't want this to be the answer to your users because they're on your website, they're asking for specific questions about how to use your specific software. So if we go to our personal model here and ask it the same question, you can see, yes, you can add new team members, go to the team or members section on your account settings, yada, yada, yada. So it's given us the specific version of the answer. And obviously if they ask slightly different answer or combination where they may be asking two things at once, it'll be able to dynamically change as GPT does and answer that question very intelligently. So how are we actually doing this? Now, in order to complete this, it's going to be a few API calls, which might sound a little bit scary, but it's actually not too hard. So first thing we're going to be doing is actually just creating our simple UI here, and then we're going to be going on to our API calls. Now, obviously, there seems to be a lot here, but essentially all the API calls are these 4 API calls here. Now, the completion API call is just to get the answer, or actually is using getting the text file back, which is a pretty standard API call that we've covered before on this channel. And these 3 are going to be the actual API calls specific to training the model. So what happens basically is you get your training file, which is a specific code, but we're going to get ChatGPT to help us format that file. You basically have to upload it to OpenAI, and then you create a fine-tuning job from that file that's been uploaded. And then once the training's done, you can just do another API call to grab that model ID, and then you can use it within the chat or the completions API. So on the face of it, it's a lot of API calls. It might seem quite complex and quite complicated, but as you'll see, it is fairly straightforward once we get into it. So without further ado, let's start building out our interface. Right, so what we've got here is just a new blank page for our Bubble application. It's the index for me, but you can obviously create a new page and name it help page, for example. I've just got a little Bubble branded header at the top here. So the first thing we want to do is just add a nice title. As you can see, our head is kind of obscuring it here. So I'm going to go onto layout and add 100 pixels on the top and then center it in the middle of our page. I'm going to go to appearance and then name it help page. I'm going to put 30 for the size, and then I'm going to do our branding colors and maybe make it bold. Perfect. So the next thing we're going to want to do is add in a input in input forms. Grab that, align it centrally again, and then go up to visual elements and then add a button. So a good trick to group elements in a container very quickly is to actually hold shift, grab the 2 elements that you want, and then right click after letting go of shift. And then you can see here, we can group elements in a row container, and that just saves us a bunch of time having to format that. We're gonna center this new container in the middle. Let's add 20 pixels on the top, so it's far away from our title. And then if we click into our container onto our button, we can vertically align that in the middle. And then if you click next here, we can put it on the right because that is kind of standard UI design. Now we're gonna go onto the appearance tab here and then delete this and then rename our button Ask. Perfect. And then we're gonna rename our placeholder here. Perfect. So now what we have is our input that we can send to the completions API and then the button to trigger that workflow. Now for the actual message to come up, we're going to need another text on our screen. So we're going to go to visual elements and then drag that piece of text on there. We're going to center it. We're going to add 40 pixels this time. And then just so it's kind of standardly formatted, it's not going to go too wide, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add its max width for 50% of the page. And then I'm going to uncheck fit width to content. Perfect. Now I'm going to go back onto appearance. And then, I'm going to center it in the font layout section here. Now, what this text is going to be the payload from our API completions call. I'm actually going to store that in a custom state. So what we're going to do is we're going to click the page and then we're going to create a new custom state. A custom state is literally just a temporary holder of information, so you don't have to store that information in your database, which can clog up your database with lots of data that you don't need to keep permanently. So you can find it in this eye icon here. So we've just clicked that, and now you can see we can add a new custom state. So we're going to name this custom state, and the type is going to be text. I'm going to click create. I'm going to leave the default value alone. And now here we can add some dynamic data, and if we can go to the index, you can see we can now grab that answer custom state. Perfect. Now the last thing we need to do here is we don't always want this visible. So what we're going to do, we're going to uncheck on the layout tab, this element is visible on page load. And then we're going to create a condition where on this text, where when the index's answer is not empty, so it has something in it. So we've done a call and we've got that text there. Then this element is visible and checked. So anytime that a question hasn't been asked or the page has been loaded, nothing's going to be there. But as soon as we have asked a question and sent that API call to the completion API, then this text will become visible. So now it's time for the API aspect to this. If I go to the plugins here, you can see we have our long list of API calls. And this one was from a previous video. The first thing you're going to want to do is get your OpenAI bearer and authentication set up. So what I'm going to do for this tutorial is completely set up a whole new API. So if you can add a new plugin, if you haven't got the API connector set up yet, what you do is you just add a plugin, type in API, and then install the API connector from Bubble. Now, all APIs is a way for your app to talk to other third-party apps and interact with them. It's called Application Programming Interface. So your application is basically interfacing with another application's program. So what we're going to do is going to add another API. We're going to call this API OpenAI. And the OpenAI API is actually a private key in header format for its basically password. So as you can see, it's given us the authorization, and we're going to need to put our OpenAI API key, which just basically tells OpenAI that it's you using these credits. And the piece of code that you're going to need is bearer and your OpenAI API key, as you can see here. So I'm going to copy that, close this again, and now we can head over to OpenAI to grab our API key. So what we're going to want to do is go to OpenAI. If you just click API reference here, and then we can go to dashboard. Now, as you can see, the dashboard has a few different options, but we're going to want to go to API keys, and we're going to create a new API key in the top right hand corner here. Then name it fine tune and create that API key. Now, once you've actually created an API key, you're not going to be able to see it again in your dashboard anywhere. So you want to save that somewhere, maybe on a note or something, just copy and paste it. But what we're going to do here is copy and then go to our Bubble application and then paste that in to our private key section here. And you want a space in between the bearer and your API key. Now, one more thing we need is to have the type and header for all the calls, which is going to be content type. So we're going to copy that, click add a shared header, paste in content type, and the content type that they use is application JSON. So we're going to grab that and then paste that in here again. So now we're ready to create an actual API call. Up until this point, we've just been setting up basically our passwords and authentication to use OpenAI. But now we have that all set up. We don't have to do this for every API call. We can just create a new call and the authorization access code is basically just inbuilt. So it saves us a bunch of time. If we go over back to our Notion document here, we've done our input, we've done the text, and we've done the custom state. Now what we're going to want to do is create a training file here. So to know how we're going to do that, we're going to actually go and look at the fine-tuning API reference. So if we go back onto Google, back onto where we got our API keys, then we can go onto docs. If we go to fine-tuning, you can see there's this section called preparing your dataset. So OpenAI is basically expecting this type of content to train the actual model. So as you can see, every line of it is a message, and each message is in its own JSON-L form code. But it's pretty simple. All it is the role of the system, which is you're a factual chatbot. So this is what the instructions you're giving the actual model. And then afterwards you have the user, which is basically what the question is. And then the assistant is the actual answer that you want it to give. So basically you have to create this for every single query or response, or how to use any part of your application, and format it exactly like this with all of the brackets, etc. in the right places here. Now, obviously, this can seem a little bit daunting, but we can actually just use ChatGPT to help us format that correctly. So if you've got maybe a whole list of support tickets with answers, if you've got maybe a wiki or some kind of document that has that kind of questions and answers format, you can just paste it into ChatGPT and then get it to basically format it in that specific way. But what I'm going to do, as I'm just doing a theoretical one, is I'm just going to give it that piece of code and make it create one of its own back, essentially, for a fake website. So I'm going to copy this code, and then we're just going to type the prompt. So I'm going to give you a bit of JSON-L code to train a model of ChatGPT. I want you to create the user assistant, and the other piece was, we're going to give it the role, user and assistant. So Basically, I've said I'm going to give you a bit of JSON code to train the model of ChatGPT. I want you to create the user and the system sections of the code, but I want you to always be a helpful assistant for a job posting site, giving really good and clear help. And then we're just going to give it the code here, which we've copied from the docs in fine tuning, prepare your data set. So we're going to copy this first section here and then paste it in. As you can see, it's going to start formatting all of the different bits and bobs that we need. So as you can see, we've got 3 pieces of code here, and ChatGPT has been really helpful at formatting everything we want. So it's had the role system. You're very helpful specializing in providing clear and concise guidance for a job posting site. You might want to put the name and tone and etc. in there. And then what we can do is we can see that it's done the user, which would be maybe email inquiries that you've had, or your wiki titles, for example. And then it's given us or created us the answers here. So it's done this perfectly. Now, if we look at the docs, you're actually going to want to use 50 to 100 training examples, because that's what they say typically they can see good improvements from. So you're going to want to have at least 50 to 100 examples there. But what I've actually done is created this file to save a bit of time for this tutorial. So essentially, you're going to want to get ChatGPT to format this all correctly. You're going to want to have 50 to 100 examples for the training file. And then you're going to want to paste this into a text file. So what I've used is just the text edit option from the Apple, but anything that just creates just a clean text file. So if we look here, you can see the format where you can say make rich text, which has all the different values. You do not want rich text. You want to have a plain text file just like this. And basically every line needs to be its own message. So if you were to pull this out, it will all go into one line. And then every single one of these lines needs to be 100% correct for this to work. So you definitely want to not only rely on ChatGPT, just quickly go through, make sure all of the brackets at the end are like that, and that there's no missing bits of information in there. So yeah, now we've got our training file. We're going to want to save it. I'm going to resave this one. Training file. And you're going to file, save, and now it is saved to your downloads. So now we've got that training file, we can go ahead and set up the first call, which is the upload file or file upload API call, which basically gives that file to OpenAI. So let's go to our documentation here. We're going to want to go on API reference, and we're going to want to go on files. You can see the first API call is file upload, and the things it requires is the file and the purpose. So as you can see, it's given us the example purpose fine tune here. So this is actually a perfect example request we can just copy and paste into Bubble. So you're going to want to grab this C URL, which is just the type of code that is used for API calls, and go to your Bubble application. And in our new API, we've authenticated it, and you can import another call from C URL. If we use this option, we can paste that in, click import, and it's already formatted our call perfectly, almost perfectly, I should say. So as you can see, it's trying to do the authorization bearer option, which is going to delete that because we've got that in our large API box. And what we're going to want to do initially is just rename this to file upload. We're going to want to change this to an action so we can actually use it within our Bubble workflows. If it's just data, you actually can't see it within your workflows. You can't search for it, but if it's an action, you can. And then we're going to leave the data type as JSON, and we're going to actually be sending a file. So we don't want for the body type to have a JSON. We're going to want to have form data. So if we add a parameter and we add another parameter, what we can do is go back to our fine tuning to see which parameters we need to add. In here, one was purpose and one was the file, but let's just go back to get the actual correct code. So I'm going to copy this here. We're going to go back. We're going to paste in purpose and file. So we can see, I'm going to delete this. We can see here the purpose we want is fine tune. And then we're going to paste that in there. And the file, we actually want to uncheck private and click send file. We're going to want to uncheck private on here as well. So now this is where we can upload by clicking upload here. Our training file, we can open that. And this API call that we're going to send off in the initialize, once we click this button here, we'll send this to OpenAI. Perfect, good upload. And the one thing we're going to want to save is this file ID, because that's how we reference this file in our subsequent API calls. So we click save, and now our training file is with OpenAI. So we can move on to the next call. So our next call is the fine tuning job. So this is the actual, here's the file. It's already been uploaded to OpenAI. Now train the model API call. So this is probably the only call you wish you would have had to do, but it is the main training file call. So what we're going to want to do is go back to our API reference here, go on fine tuning, and it's this create fine tuning job option here. So requirements, which is the things you have to have, is the model training file. As you can see, there's other things you can specify, which changes kind of how the model is created, but we're just gonna stick to the two requirements here. So we're gonna again grab the CURL code here, go back to our bubble application and import another call from CURL, paste that in. Perfect. So now it's formatted a lot of things for us, which is really, really good, but we're gonna again want to get rid of our authentication because we've already done that there. We're gonna rename this fine tune job. We're gonna make it an action, and then we're gonna leave it as JSON here again. Now, as you can see, because we changed it to form data, we had to specify the parameters by adding a parameter using that button here. And you can do that for all API calls, but you can do it another way, which I'm going to show you now, which is in the actual body code here. So it's basically saying if we were to initialize this call, it might work, but it's always going to use this file and it's always going to use that model. So we don't want that. We want to use the file that we've uploaded here. So we're going to basically be able to dynamically change that, and you do that by telling bubble in the code that it's a dynamic value. So the parameter is file training here, and the dynamic value is not formatted at the moment. So we're going to basically delete all of this. I'm happy with the dynamic file name being file. So all you have to do is basically add an a greater than, and then a less than sign. And if you see, you can click off, and now it's created that dynamic value, which you can put in this value input here. So I'm going to uncheck that. We can put in our file ID, which I've taken off my clipboard. So I'm going to reinitialize this call and grab it again. Now our file's in there. So now once that's all set up, you can initialize this call. And it's saying that model GPT 4.0 mini is not available, fine tuning, or doesn't exist. So we're going to go back to our API reference here, and it's given us that as a potential model. So that's a little bit frustrating. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the dashboard, we're going to go to the docs, and then we're going to see what models we can use in fine tuning by going to the fine tuning section on the left hand side. So which models can be fine tuned? We've got GPT, this one, GPT, that one. So I'm just going to copy this here. We go back to our bubble application, paste that into the parentheses. So although the actual API reference has given this model as something you can train, depending on when you view this video, this model might not be good for training. And so how you check that is you basically want to look what models you can use up in the docs. So if we go to our documents on the OpenAI website again, we can go to fine tuning, and then you can see fine tuning is currently available for these models. So this will dynamically change based on when this video comes out. So you want to basically take one of these models. So I will choose this recommended one, which is the 4.0 mini, and then we're going to go back to our bubble application and then just paste that within our parentheses here and initialize. Perfect. Now the API call has worked, so now it will be training the model. So what we're going to want to do now again is grab this fine tuning ID and save it for our next call. So one of the things you can do to check the status, because obviously training a model is not instant, it might take 20 minutes, which is what it did for me last night. So what you can basically do is go onto the documents again, go to the OpenAI, and then if you go to dashboard, you can see there's this fine tuning here. So once your fine tuning job has succeeded, you can see you've got this output model here, which we can use later once we've formatted our chat or our completions API from OpenAI. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go to our API reference again. We're going to want to scroll down or scroll up to chat, and we're going to want to create a completion here. So just like all the other calls, we're again just going to copy the CURL code, go to our bubble application, and we're going to import another call from CURL. Click paste and then import. So again, we've got our authorization which we can delete. We don't want to name this completions. We're going to want to change this to action so we can get it within our workflows. We can leave all these sections the same, but we're going to want to change a few things dynamically as we did in the training job, fine-tuning job, API call. So we don't want to change the model because we want to change this to our specific training model. So what we're going to want to do, we're going to want to name it something that we can remember. So we'll name this model. Then we're going to, inside of the parentheses, do a greater than and then a less than sign, or another greater than sign, but the other way. And then we'll probably leave this the same, but you can change it dynamically. One thing we're definitely going to want to change again is the content, which is what your users are going to be asking the actual help portal. So we're going to name this questions. Perfect. So now we can actually do our first call from the back end using our model. So what we're going to want to do first of all is uncheck the private here so we can access it, and then go back to our fine tuning dashboard. And now we can grab our model here, go to our bubble application and paste that in the model section. And then the question we can ask it is, who do you work for? And then initialize that call. As you can see, we've got our response, and our response that it gave us, which is the message content is, I work for the platform you're using, how can I assist you today? So as you can see, it's working as a good assistant. So let's save that. So if we were to go and start putting this API or plugging in all the APIs into our API calls in the front end, we wouldn't be able to see it because our use as is currently data. So we want to convert this to action. And if we name this to chat help and then reinitialize the call and save it again, now we can go to the design tab. We can start our workflows, and then we can go to our plugins, and then you can see we've got this chat help API call. So as you can see, we can dynamically change this if we wanted to, if we've got a load of different models for different purposes, for example, and also the question, which is what we're going to be doing. So we're going to go in here, we're going to have the question as our input, on our page, which is input, ask a question, it's a value, and we're going to be using our nicely fine-tuned model here. And the thing we need to do to display that text that we put in at the start of this tutorial is we're going to need to set the state of the index answer. So if we type in this state, you can see we've got this set state of an element. You want to click that, go to index, which is the page name. You can actually make custom states on pretty much any element, but I just chose the page, and we've got our answer here, and that answer is going to be the result of step 1's API call. It is in the choices list. If we scroll down, you can see the message content here. Now, this is still in list format, but because there's only ever going to be one answer, we can just use the first item, and then it gets it to just one single piece of text that we can display. So if we come off that now, we should be ready to test our new fine-tuned ChatGPT model. Perfect. So in order to test this, in the intro I kind of showed you by dynamically changing the GPTs, but if we go to our text file, we can find something that we know it should know about. As we can see, the question we're asking is, how do I cancel a job post? So I'm going to ask it, I need to cancel a job post, help please. If we click enter, to cancel a job post, go to your dashboard, locate the job you wish to cancel, and select the cancel option. And as you can see, that is pretty much the textbook answer here. This video has been about how you can create your own fine-tuning models. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let us know what you're building in the comment section. Any links and resources will also be there as well. Cheers.
And just like that, you now know how to create your very own custom GPT without writing a single line of code. If you wanted to stay up to date with any additional Bubble resources I share, I'd always recommend hitting that subscribe button on my channel, so that way you can be the first to know whenever I drop a new video. For now though, I just wanted to say a massive thank you for taking the time to watch this specific video, and I wish you all of the best on your own no-code journey.